So, just to recap what we've done, in the previous sections, our whole intention was rapport building. So, we had a global growth outlook, which provides a lot of value to the client and it provides a lot of rapport with our organization because we demonstrate our understanding of the markets and understanding of how the world works at present. And also, seeing as though we have got more resources to spend on research than the client, who is probably a factory or a company that deals in certain goods and services and does not have the capabilities that they hired us for, either as consultants or as bankers. This is our core competence. Because they don't have those in house capabilities, that's why they came to us. So we've demonstrated our understanding of the macroeconomic or the global landscape. And we've given the client something that is value added. And if the meeting has to end here, it represents value add for the client. So we've already provided value. The next thing that we looked at was our financial model analysis. Now, this has two benefits. It demonstrates our understanding of the client and an understanding of the client's problem. And it also builds rapport because if we've got our analysis right and it is in depth, then the client can trust the solutions that we will propose in this section. And if the client can see the value of the solutions that we propose and the client understands that we understand their business, then it's good for rapport and for trust building. So in this section, what we're going to do is we're going to highlight our potential responses to the problem that the client faces. So let's jump right in. Hedging costs. So a key point to consider for this company is the perceived benefit versus the perceived cost of undertaking a hedging program. So in order to analyze the cost of a hedging program, the main cost driver for any hedge is your volatility. The more volatile the underlying asset that you wish to hedge or the underlying factor that you wish to hedge, the more expensive the hedge would be. So we look at the different volatility profiles historically for the three hedgeable factors in the company's profitability, which were the exchange rate, the copper price, and the price of crude oil. And we see that crude oil highly volatile historically. So this would translate into a very expensive hedge structure if you were to focus on crude oil. And in our previous slides, what we determined was that crude oil formed a very small part of the company's profitability mix, and the company was very robust to movements in crude oil. So this leads us to conclude that perhaps focusing on crude oil hedging would not bring about operational profit protection in a very efficient manner. And going back to our previous slide, what we saw was the benefit to hedging copper is much higher than the benefit to hedging exchange rates. So if it's cheaper to hedge copper, and if copper hedging provides a greater benefit, then it would then follow that we would focus more of our attention on copper hedging than on forex hedging. So if we also look at what the historical copper price has been, we can see that copper is near record highs. So we'd want to lock this in because at this point, the company is doing very well with these levels of profitability. So for this reason, we have focused the remainder of our presentation on copper hedging. Hedging copper would produce the highest benefit to the company at relatively lowest cost. So in focusing on copper hedging, what we can propose is three potential hedging strategies for copper. And copper can be hedged using either forward contracts, put options, or more exotic derivative structures such as spreads. So I'm just going to pause this for the sake of the course. So when you're proposing solutions to the client, you don't necessarily just want to present them at a superficial level. So what I've done here is the solution is to hedge copper, and I've illustrated why that is the solution. But I've also given the client numerous options as to how that can take place. I've explained the structure of each of these financial instruments. I've highlighted the benefits. And I've also highlighted some important considerations to think about before, or some potential drawbacks, if you wish, of each of these hedging structures. So basically, giving the client as much as possible an informed point of view before they make the ultimate decision. But I'm not going to leave it there. In the subsequent section, I will highlight which of these strategies I believe is the best strategy going forward, but still giving the client the advantages and disadvantages of each alternative. So this is what this slide is about. Before we come to our final conclusion, it's recommended to hedge copper production only and hedge using forward contracts. Basically, I summarize everything that the presentation has covered thus far. So this is very important. This is probably the most important slide thus far. We have started with our executive summary, and our executive summary has, just going back here, our executive summary has talked about where we were previously, all our previous interactions with the client, where we are today, and how this presentation intends to take us forward. The global growth outlook and financial model analysis was just to demonstrate our analysis capabilities to add value to the client, and also demonstrate to the client that we understand their business and we understand the problem that they face before we propose solutions to their problem. So these sections are namely or mainly for rapport building. And finally, we propose solutions to the client's problem. And then we condense that in one line, what we recommend the client does, given all our analysis thus far. So I'll just read through some of these quick. ABC Mining is in a crucial growth phase post-construction. They have expressed an interest in formulating a hedging strategy to protect their profit margins. Now, that's the purpose of this entire presentation. Hedging copper has been seen to be the most effective tool in protecting profit margins, exchange rates, and fuel less effective. Hedging strategy involving upfront costs is not advisable due to the current growth phase of the company. So that just comes from the three alternatives that I put forward, and what the most important considerations to consider would be. Seeing as though the company is still in its growth phase, we wouldn't want them to incur any additional upfront costs. So I think that's the major consideration to make this option here, hedging using forward contracts, seeing as though forward contracts don't have any upfront cost. That point just is the most important point to consider when considering which of the three solutions the client should take into consideration. The project finance facilities begin to amortize. This should free up credit lines. Okay, these are just technical points. And then this is just our research and more technical points. But the main thing I want to focus on is at the end of this slide, you should point to a clear conclusion. It should not be ambiguous from this point onwards.